Hello, everyone. Welcome to NJ AI Solution Podcast, where we turn AI into real business results. I'm your host, Nikunj Thakur, founder of NJ AI Solution. Really excited for today's conversation. I'm joined by Scott, president of Sterling Corporation. He has been in podcast and online education space for years. One of his show, Weight Loss and the Mind, hit 375,000 subscribers in its first year, and he has taught over 170,000 people through Udemy. Now with Sterling, he's helping authors succeed with content and digital product. Scott, it's great to have you today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's dive in. You have been in the podcasting industry since 2005, have seen the rise of content-driven business. How has that shaped your approach at Sterling?
Well, we recognize that there's an infinite desire for content. People that are interested in their health or in business, in reading romance, fiction, science fiction. I love science fiction myself. And people just want more and more and more. And through podcasting, you're able to really reach that audience and create that community. And it works really well with authors. I know a very good Canadian author. I'm Canadian. And he was, I might be exaggerating, but it flopped. Nobody wanted his book. He had given it to about 8 publishers. They all said no. And he was just about ready to give up. And he said, I'm going to take each chapter of my story and of my novel, and I'm going to read it and put it out as a podcast. Chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, right to the end. And as he was doing it, people enjoyed his story. I mean, in the beginning, we all sat around fires at night and told stories, right? So that's what he was doing in our new world. And he got great feedback. People loved it. And he had tens of thousands of downloads. So he went back to the publishers and he said, listen, you didn't like my book, but these 10,000 people did. So maybe you should publish it. So they published it, and it won an award for comedy in Canada. So he did it for his next book, and it was a bestseller in Canada. He did it for his next book. As he finished the chapter, he would read it, put it on. So we now had this community that was very engaged, and they just loved what he was writing. So a combination of writing and telling our stories, I think, is really, really powerful in today's age. And we don't get enough of it.
At Sterling, you still believe in the podcast approach and you still do podcast regularly. So that how that helps.
It's what we do in Sterling at free-ebooks.net is we allow authors to upload their books for free, and people can download the books and read them for free. And what this does is it gives everybody an opportunity to get exposure that they wouldn't get before. We have 5 million members of our site, and so if you wanted to get a book published and you went to the book publishers, they would have all these questions, and one of which was, how big is your following? How big is your community? And most people, it's like my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother, couple cousins, that's it. Whereas if you put the book on our site, you have the opportunity to reach hundreds of thousands of people, and you can see the downloads, right? So it's really good for testing. Like basically you put it up, there's no risk, and if 10,000 people download your book, you can approach the publishers and say, listen, I have a hot book here, and go from there.
Okay. Your company pivoted from physical products to content during pandemic. What made you decide where to go from there?
Well, we believe it or not, there was a market for thousands of books on USB drives or cards. And of course, before COVID hit, we were looking at that saying, this is not sustainable, because they're building laptops now that don't have USB ports, right? Like it was kind of going away for a while. So like, how are people going to be able to use these? And the technology was becoming so easy that you really didn't need it. So we were looking at phasing it out. Then when COVID hit, nobody was going into stores, nobody was buying things, and we knew that was basically the end of that product area that we were putting out. And I don't think it'll ever come back. I could be wrong, but I think
Yeah, now everything is available online, so product area won't come back, I guess.
yeah. And like the technology has just changed, right? Everywhere you go, there's fast Wi-Fi. I travel the world, and I can tell you 5 years ago, there was a lot of places with very slow Wi-Fi. So if you can download an ebook off of free ebooks in like 10 seconds or instantly, then why would you bother, you know, going to a store and buying this thing
So,
and then trying to figure out how it all works, right? Whereas you can just download it, read it, and you're good, right?
okay, you spoke about prioritizing focus over chasing every idea. So how do you decide what to tackle first and what can wait for later?
That's a great question. And I don't know that there's uh, a really good answer. My way is I list everything out. And then I look at it and I say, this is most important, this is most important, this is most important, put a star and then try to get to them. The problem is the other things on the list are usually faster to get done and easier. So, I can check them off and get the dopamine hit a lot faster when I do stuff that's not a high priority. I have a friend who had a sentence that he always asked him, a question he always asked himself when he was looking at, a couple or three things that he needed to do or more. It was, what is the most important thing that'll help me achieve my goals that I can do right now? And then it's like, okay, so I have my list. That's the one right there. That's the one. Then the problem is, are you actually going to do it? Because usually there's a lot of reasons to procrastinate. There's a lot of frustrations that may happen and that sort of thing. So I'm a very much a list person. I write out a list of my day, like at what this, it's 6 o'clock where I am right now. I'm meeting you. That's on my piece of paper right here.
So,
And then I have a second list of like projects that, things that I want to do, plans or proposals I want to make, and that's on that list too. So once you have it written down, I feel like then it's easy to say, okay, these are the priorities, this is what I'm going to get done. And you just sort of let the subconscious make the choices, right? Because what you're called to do is usually what you should be doing, but it's not always the thing that you consciously think is number one on the list.
yeah, sometimes you have to do some other things first. It
Yeah.
totally depends on situations.
Also, it's important to know yourself. For me, if I get on the computer and I get started on something, then I'll get started on a lot of other things and get them done. But if I don't get started, I need a haircut, I got to buy some groceries, this, I got to go for a walk, I need to get fit, there's all these things, and plus the distractions of the internet. I sometimes find if you pick an easy thing on your list, even if it's not the most important, and you get it done in 5 minutes, then it's like, yeah, I got something done. And I'm in the groove now. I'm in the work mode because as you can see, I'm alone. So the motivation has to come from me. And my team also motivates me because I don't want to disappoint them. But generally speaking, it has to come from me. So how can you motivate yourself, inspire yourself to get your work done and get through the blocks that happen, right? That's a question we all have to ask ourselves, and we only know our own answers, not someone else's.
Yeah. So you help authors navigate tech, marketing, and publishing. What's one area where people struggle the most today?
I think if you were to ask authors, it's the marketing. I think if you were to ask publishers, it's the writing. Writers need to write. They need to write a lot, and then they need to read their writing and improve. Sometimes masterminds are really, really important. That's where a few people get together to support each other. So if you're an author, find a bunch of other authors. You don't have to, if you're a sci-fi author, it can be a romance, it can be a nonfiction, it doesn't matter. And then test your material out on them. Like, this is my plot. What do you think? Oh, it's a dumb plot. Oh, it's a great plot, And then my favorite book, it's a trilogy, actually. It's The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. Amazing, amazing book. I didn't know this, but he was English. I knew that. But he had C.S. Lewis and about two or three other famous authors whose names escape me that they met every week and they would talk about their stories. So the stories of Narnia was C.S. Lewis's, Tolkien and Middle Earth, that was his story. And they didn't write the stories in a vacuum. They would do their writing, they would think of their plots, they would come to the group and they would share it. And everyone got better because they got feedback from other people that were authors. So I think one of the areas that authors really miss out on is they have this dream in their mind of being in a log cabin up in the forest with a fire in the corner, typing away, right? And it's a beautiful image, but the fact of the matter is like you need to talk to people and you need to share people, share with people your stories and get the feedback so that okay, this worked. Oh, this didn't work. And you see it all the time with stand-up comedy, right? They stand up in front of a crowd, they tell their jokes. If the joke is bad, they get booed and tomatoes thrown at them. If the joke is good, everybody laughs, right? And by doing that over and over and over again, they become good stand-up comics or they quit. And I think, it's the same thing with authors. If you love your writing, if you love writing, then surround yourself with other authors who also love writing. Share your stories, share your ideas. Hopefully nobody steals them, but if they do, that's part of life. And write the best book that you can.
Yeah, your platform does a great work helping authors publish their book online and reach millions of people,
Yes.
and they will get feedback on how their book is. So that's great.
Yes. Yeah, and we approve every book. Like we don't necessarily read the whole book, but we go through every book. We go through the cover. We sometimes improve the cover, and we will give authors feedback if the book is not, up to our standards. We don't feel, three-page book is not going to get published on the site.
So looking ahead to 2025, what's next for Sterling? Are you focused on audience growth, product expansion, or building partnership? And what's the biggest challenge that is holding you back right now?
That's another good question. Right now, I think we're just focused on getting really good at our processes, making sure that when someone signs up, they have a good experience, both as an author and as a reader.
A
And
user,
then
yeah.
looking at how we can create more excitement for the books. So one of the things that we're looking at doing is adding newsletters. So, there'll be like a science fiction newsletter comes out once a week, or a romance newsletter comes out once a week, and we'll feature two or three romance books that we think are really, well written. And we'll probably have an article about, something that, somebody has written that's relevant to the topic. So if it's nonfiction, maybe business books or a weight loss book or a health newsletter, and then some articles helping people to, be healthier or be fitter or whatever. So we're looking at ways that we can really engage with our audience more, recognizing that it's very fragmented, right? Like there's probably 30 or 40 different categories. So if someone's interested in reading their children, they got a 4-year-old and they want to read them a child's book, that person's interests are very different from somebody that wants to learn AI or crypto or travel the world. So we really
Yeah.
need to segment and then see what we can do to add value for each segment because they're very different. It's not Walmart where someone comes in and they wander all over and get everything that they want. We're talking directly to people and we don't want to make sure that we're giving them the right messages.
So it's like you want to send weekly newsletters to the users, recommending them book according to their interest. That you like
Yes.
romance, then here are the top romance book on our website.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And we
Okay,
now have the technology to do it, so it's good.
what's one simple but useful piece of advice you would give to founders in e-commerce right now?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think if you're starting out, be really clear about who your audience is, be really clear about who your ideal customer or client is, and be really laser focused on what is the problem or problems that you can solve for them. And then make it easy for them to, first of all, understand what your message is. And secondly, to get a hold of you or buy, depending on what, whether it's a service or a product, because oftentimes people make it really hard to. I give you an example. It's a podcast example, and it just happened to me yesterday. One of my friends sent out a newsletter. He has a podcast, and he said, this other fellow, this is my guest. And I knew the guest. So I thought, oh, I'm really interested in what conversation these two friends of mine would have. So he said, click here to listen to the podcast. So I click, it takes me to a page, and it's the podcast page on his website. It has a picture of the guest, it has everything you need, but it doesn't have a play button. How can I listen? Right? So I had to copy the title, go to Google search, put it in, put my friend's podcast name in, hit enter, and Shopify and Apple popped up, but there it was. So then I go to Apple Podcast, click on it, I listen. But I thought, why is that not on his page? Which reminds me, I have to email him and tell him, because I'm sure it's supposed to be on the page, right? But oftentimes, we do things, we spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money, and then when the user goes to use it, they're frustrated. So, the first customer you should have should be you. You've done all this work, you have your e-commerce set up, you've got everything done. Now go buy and see if you can. Because half the time I think you can't, right? It's like, it doesn't work. Or you do buy, but then the page that says thank you and here's the product or whatever doesn't show up. So make sure your systems work.
Yeah, the page should be easy to navigate for the user and convenient to use. That's absolutely correct. So podcast being still one of your main strategy, you have been doing podcast since 2005. For reference, I am born in 2004. So you're doing podcast since I am alive. Podcasts help solo founders.
There's a number of ways that it can help. And the most obvious way is just getting your message out, right? Another way is when you interview people, there's a really good chance that if they're famous and popular and everything else, you'll get some rub and you'll get some traffic because of that. Some of the not quite so well-known ways that it can help are when you have guests on, you have an opportunity to network with the guest, find out what they're about. How can you help them? Being of service is number one, right? The law of reciprocity is very, very strong. And if you help somebody with no expectation of return, they're going to do whatever they can to help you back. And even if they don't, there's all this goodwill, good energy that's around you that's going to attract your ideal clients. But how can you help your guests would be a big question, right? So we spent half an hour together. I understand your business. Is there any way that I can help you grow your business? Anything that you need or that I can keep an eye out for you? And then that also gives you an opportunity to follow up, right? Because, a month later, I found this person. I think he would be your ideal client. Can I introduce you? Oh, yeah, of course. Great. Thanks. And you start developing those relationships. Some become developed quickly, some develop slowly, right? So you can't say, well, I sent a couple leads to this guy, nothing ever happened, and he never sent anything back to me, so I'm going to forget it. That's just not the way it works. And the other thing too is if you're growing a business and you start having staff, one of the problems is keeping the culture going, keeping the community that you've created going, the vision going. And that's where like a private podcast that only members of your team access is really important. Now, you don't want it to be long. You don't want to be like 3 hours going on and on and on every week, but certainly a 5-10 minute podcast of this is what we did last week. This is, the debriefing. This is what happened. Here's some things that we learned or I learned. Here's some things to think about. Here's some inspiration. This is the direction we're going. These are our values. There are all those sort of things that you and then you just make it as part of the routine. On Monday morning, you listen to this for 15 minutes, then start your week. And that may replace the weekly meetings. Lots of times people will have weekly meetings, but they tend to be like just focused on, sales last week, expenses last week, advertising this week, and not so much on the big picture, on the inspiration. Like when people buy into your vision, then it's not just a job. I'm not just getting paid 10, 20, 30 bucks an hour, whatever it is. And it's not drudgery. I'm not just showing up and pushing some buttons on a keyboard. I'm making a big difference. And one of my other businesses, we supply virtual assistants. And we always tell the clients that you're not just getting an employee. We're not just going to give you somebody and forget about it. We're a boutique. We're small. We're all about the service and making sure everything works good. But more than that, you're impacting a community in the Philippines. Most of them are in the Philippines, right? So I just use that country. These people are able to help their parents, live better. They're able to look after their kids. They're able to improve their community, and you're making a difference in that. And our clients are, because we attract people who are heart-centered, that want to make a difference in the world. They love that. They grasp onto that. And then oftentimes months later, I'll be talking to them and saying, yeah, I feel really proud that I'm making a difference in the Philippines. It's like, they listened, right?
Yeah.
So that's, nobody talks about that, but in a private podcast for your company and your staff, I think is a really, really important thing, particularly for morale and making sure everybody's going in the right way. Everybody understands the direction of the company and the values.
I think that was a great answer. Podcast can help you reach your audience, help you connect with like-minded people. If you are doing a podcast, you're a veteran business, your podcast can help someone new like me to enter business. What should I do and what I should avoid? So that was a
Right.
great answer. Yeah.
Thank you.
So before we wrap up, I have been asking a lot of founders this lately. AI is showing up all kind of way across e-commerce. Out of curiosity, how are you thinking about AI in your work right now? Is there anything you are exploring or curious about?
There's quite a few, actually. We use Claude to fix our programming problems now. We had a programmer, and he wanted to move on, and we were thinking, well, I guess we got to hire a new programmer. And the CEO said, well, just let me check this out a little bit more. And the next thing you know, he's telling Claude, like, look at this code, fix this code up. And in a day, he's made progress, as opposed to 3 or 4 days or a week with the programmer. And the other area that we're using it a lot is actually with podcasts, where we do an interview and then we put it into Castmagic, is the service we use, and it'll give us a transcription, it'll give us a summary, it'll give us study questions, it'll give us Twitter or X posts and LinkedIn posts and all sorts of, just tons and tons of content that we can then just quickly use to send out on our social sites. So, and then the other way that we're using it is planning the podcast. Okay, so I have a podcast on health. What are some things that we could talk about for the next 4 weeks in the summertime? And I use ChatGPT, and it comes back with, here's some ideas. So it's possible. And another thing that we do, we have a few clients that we take their picture and then we take a short script and then we get AI to make them talk. So it's really, I'm real. This is real. This is not fake. And we don't do it to fool people, but we do it for where they do an interview and then we get
efficiency.
we get a summary of the interview, and then we get the AI to tell people about it, say, go here to do it. And that was because we didn't want to get the client to do it. And sometimes the client go off on the tangents, and they you want a little tight piece of video, and I can't get it from them, right? Because they talk about this, that, or they change topics or whatever, and it's just a mess. With the AI, we put the script in, we put the picture in, and it says exactly what I want. Nothing more, nothing less. But I think it's really important that we recognize that as good as AI is and as good as it's going to be, we need to really focus on that human touch. And people that are inauthentic and try to trick you into thinking that this is real when it's not, eventually they're going to be exposed and they're going to lose a lot of their reputation. And reputation is always key.
Thank you so much for sharing your insight with our audience. For any listener who might like to connect with you, what's the best way to reach out?
It would be Scott at Paton Mail.
Thank you so much.
And if you do, mention the show in the subject line so I know that you're not spamming me.
Yeah, okay.